We can do this?
Yeah.
We can do this.
Yes, we can.
Good evening. We're all ready? Good evening. Right, so the idea is we get to do this as long as we get to this, even at a great distance.
Do you have any idea how many listened in this morning?
There were a number. It said 16 for an average of 20 minutes, meaning if somebody like went on and off in 10 seconds, somebody else watched for an hour. So yeah, not that math necessarily works out.
Not one of the
No. Yeah, we probably lost by having such a dud of a topic. Look,
you tried your best, Rabbi.
they can't all be piles of heads at the gates of the city. Yeah. So if you're watching online, this is the book we're using, Turning Points in Jewish History. You can get it from Amazon. You can go to your local bookstore, or you can't. You can download it. And Dorit's watching. Yes. Yes. Okay. So this we how far we've gotten. We've made our way to chapter 11, which is Bar Kochba. So when last we left the story, right, or like the last sort of turning point, and the key turning point in many ways is the destruction of the Second Temple and the creation of Rabbinic Judaism, right? And those two sort of like are intimately linked in the sense of that without the temple being destroyed, who knows if like this space is created for we call Rabbinic Judaism, which is what we commonly call Judaism, right? Like for that to it's like having a forest fire, sort of like clear out the trees for something else, for something new to grow. Like the temple essentially has to be destroyed for the Judaism as we know it to flourish. So that happens, right? The next big thing, the next significant turning point that the author hits is Bar Kochba, which is about so that's page 126, right? Which is about 70 years after the destruction of the temple. Why is that important? Because the first temple, when it was destroyed, took about 70 years for the second one to be rebuilt. And everyone knows it, right? So if you're living at the time in the history watcher, okay, the temple is destroyed. 70 years later, it was rebuilt. Now the temple's been destroyed again. So guess what?
Time to rebuild.
It's time to put things in motion to rebuild. So like that presumably is on people's minds, right? Like that thing. Now, spoiler alert, it doesn't work. But that so that's one thing. Oftentimes we'll speak of the exile beginning from the time from 70 CE, from the destruction of the temple, but the exile really doesn't begin from that point. The exile really begins closer to this point in time, meaning after 70, Jews are still living in the land of Israel. They're still going about their business. It really is after the Bar Kochba rebellion that things really begin to change in a more profound way in terms of the Jewish presence, especially around Jerusalem. So this the author begins with a great story. We should actually, because a lot of this is rabbinic, it's holy text, we should say the bracha for Torah study, which is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So second paragraph there, in 126, he gives one of the great stories, which is summarizing the rabbi's sort of attitude or ambivalence about living under Rome, right? Like there's a great scene in The Life of Brian, the Monty Python movie. Remember this? Like where they're planning a revolt against Rome, and somebody says, they're arguing the People's Front for the People's front is fighting against the front of the people, sort of like this sort of for the liberation of Palestine, whatever it might be. And the Judean People's Front against the People's Front of Judea, and they're fighting with each other. And one of them says, "What have the Romans ever done for us? Nothing." Then, well, there's the roads. Well, the roads, but nothing besides that. Well, there's the roads and the aqueducts. Well, sure, the roads and the aqueducts. Whatever. Well, there's the bathhouses. Well, there's roads and aqueducts and nothing else besides that. Well, there's also the and also they keep going on. So in other words, Romans are good things. They brought order, they bring technology, they bring stability, all these other things. But still there's desire for rebellion. So the second paragraph, it gives a story from Talmud Shabbat. Rabbi Yehuda said, "How wonderful are the works of these people," meaning the Romans. "They have established markets, they've built bridges, and they've built baths." Rabbi Yossi was silent. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai answered, "They established markets for prostitutes to work there. They built bridges in order to collect tolls. They built baths to pamper themselves."
Nag.
Three different rabbis, three different attitudes. What's the first one?
Thank God for the Romans.
Thank God for the Romans, you know. Thank God for the Romans. Here, I just got a message. Bridgewater School is closed until March 27th. What's today? Today's the 12th. There we go.
2 weeks.
Yeesh. There we are. What's in your quarantine queue? Right. You're supposed to study Torah even through this stuff because they added that too. First attitude, Rabbi Yehuda. How wonderful they have markets, bridges, baths. What's he saying? The first guy, not the last guy, says it for themselves. The first guy says they're good things. And by the way, what presumably would his retort be to the third guy? Third guy says he does it for himself, right? The third guy. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says would be like, says they did it for themselves, right? But
actually, what they should say to one is, "How do you know they built the markets for the prostitutes? How do you know that, Rabbi?"
Right. Well,
or the other response is, don't go to market, don't use the roads, and don't use their baths.
So first one, they brought progress, they bring order, they bring civilization, right? The second one, get to the second one in a moment. The third one is they did it for themselves. Don't act as if this is all some sort of wonderful thing going on. These are all just ways for them to indulge their base urges. They want sex, they want money, they want a life of ease. Like that's why all this stuff isn't there for you to enjoy. All this stuff is there for this sort of negative indulgence. You're sort of like you're looking at it too optimistically, as it were, too sunnily, like this. By the way, there are not just two attitudes there. There are three rabbis present. Rabbi Yossi was silent. Why was Rabbi Yossi silent? Where are they living?
In Rome.
They're living under Roman rule. So by the way, somebody's like, let's assume Rabbi Yossi knew that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai knew his political views. He had sat in class with him before and knew what Rabbi Shimon thought of the Romans. And he knew that once Rabbi Yehuda says nice things about Rome, that's going to get a response. Why is Rabbi Yossi silent?
He doesn't want to get caught speaking against Rome.
because he doesn't want God speaking against Rome. Like when you're living under an absolute monarch, right? Like, yeah, sometimes it's best to stay out of politics. He's not the first rabbi to realize, maybe it's best to stay out of politics. I'll leave that arguing to other guys, right? So one guy says great things, but that also can get you into trouble because the Romans, by the way, are the ones who destroyed the temple, right? Remember, these guys are living after the destruction, right? They defeated us in war and they destroyed the temple. Maybe it's not the smartest thing to do to be a Jewish leader praising the Romans. On the other hand, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, maybe bashing Rome isn't the smartest move, given the fact that they're the ones in charge of our lives. Rabbi Yossi, notice, keeps his mouth shut. Great little rabbinic moment there.
What about the premise you can't say something good, don't say anything.
Right, so he could. Right, so is his silence, he's placed in the middle. If he was silent after Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai spoke, then that would be more damning, right? Like the story leaves ambiguity by making him silent after the first speaker. Because after the last speaker, then why don't you speak up against it? Like none of the Roman authorities sort of have you. But that sort of speaks to some of them thought that this was great, some of them didn't, some of them tried to keep quiet. So the author again, Rosenstein, says later on the page, it says that the traditional view of these things is that after the destruction of the temple, that's when rabbinic Judaism come to its own. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai starts his academy in Yavna, and then eventually sort of moves it throughout the land of Israel to different places, and begins the process of rebuilding Judaism or building rabbinic Judaism, right? If previous destruction of the temple, Judaism focused on the temple, on the Beit HaMikdash, and on the sacrifices and things like that. Once that's gone, it all has to be reinvented, and this is the period when that happens. There's some debate as to how unanimous this was. Were there opponents? Were there not opponents? Did everyone just go along with this radical reinvention of what Jewish life would be? That we wouldn't do animal sacrifices anymore? That we would just daven in shuls? They might not have used the word daven in shuls, but to do that and to read Torah and to do that, was that a unanimous thing? Sort of to hear the rabbis tell it. There were opponents, but not a ton, and they sort of got rolled over. And the stories that they tell of it will always be that any opponents of the rabbis are sort of get humiliated intellectually in debate. But we don't know.
It makes the point that the people telling the history are the rabbis.
Correct.
So there's an actual bias in that narrative.
Absolutely. We have no source other than the rabbis. So the point is that repeat things in case anyone's watching. That the only source we have for this period are the rabbis. So correct. We have not only do Isaiah shows the rabbis, but from much later, meaning that there's some stories in the Mishnah, which is sort of comes into its current form 200, 220 of the Common Era, but most of them are in the Talmud, which isn't in its final form until hundreds of years after that. So not only are the rabbis the ones telling the story, but they're telling it much later, as it were, or it goes through, or it's morphed between now and then. So we don't know. There's no for the Great Revolt of 66 to 70. We have Josephus. We have somebody who was sort of on the sidelines trying to tell some version of straight history. Everyone's got their biases, but you can figure out his. He's trying to tell it straight. We have no similar thing for this time period. We have modern scholarship going back and guessing is what was going on, but we have nothing. We have nothing like Josephus for it. So that. But remember, before the temple was destroyed, there were all these different groups: Sadducees, Essenes, the Pharisees, and Christians. And afterwards, most of those groups seem to disappear. So what happened to them? We don't know. They might have just faded away. Anyway, so that's the setting for Bar Kokhba. Bar Kokhba, he notes again, if you look in the middle of 127, like he says, like meanwhile in 115 to 117 CE, tensions between Jews and Gentiles in Libya, Egypt, Cyprus, and Mesopotamia during Emperor Trajan's reign led to riots, open rebellions, and many thousands of casualties. That's the kind of thing that like pops up in multiple Jewish history books. I can't speak intelligently about it beyond that point, meaning that there are always references to Jewish revolts in different cities around the Mediterranean at that time. But like more specifics on that, if you want to ask, I can't offer you. But these references always pop up. So again, Jews have issues in different places. They obviously are more in that last perspective, right? Whatever, it's not that Rome is wonderful for building roads. It's that they're oppressive for the tolls that they're charging. This may have had echoes in Palestine, although we do not have clear evidence, right? So meaning that the revolt that's coming in Judea, what the Romans are about to rename Palestine, up to this point it's been called Judea, right? It's called Canaan in biblical times, and then the land of Israel sort of throughout. Judea, especially in the Second Temple period, because the kingdom of Israel had been overthrown. So it's called Judea, it seems, but later on it'll be called Palestine. When he calls it Palestine here, like before Bar Kokhba, it's somewhat of a anachronism. He says, we do know that Trajan's successor Hadrian managed to provoke serious unrest in Palestine, perhaps first by offering to support rebuilding Jerusalem and the temple, and then reneging, meaning there were a couple of false starts and stops on possibly rebuilding the temple, where politicians make promises and then don't follow through on them, that sort of thing. In any case, his policies were not as laissez-faire as those of his predecessor, and once Hadrian specifically forbade circumcision for everyone, not just Jews, as a form of mutilation, the fuse was lit for rebellion, which exploded in 130 CE when Hadrian ordered that a pagan temple be built on the site of the Beit HaMikdash, on the site of the temple. So those things, these are called historically the Hadrianic persecutions, right? The outlawing of circumcision and then building on the Temple Mount.
So that wasn't, the whole circumcision issue wasn't just a Greek thing and a Greek issue. The Romans had an issue with it too.
Correct. As sort of like heirs to Greek civilization, right?
Yeah.
Right.
The issue was it was viewed as mutilation of the body, and the body was.
The body is something
And what was
perfect.
the response to that argument?
There's a great scene in the Talmud between one of the rabbis, might have been Rabbi Akiva, I can't remember off the top of my head, and I think a Roman philosopher. Like they have different, stock heavies out of central casting. Sometimes it's the emperor, sometimes it's a philosopher, sometimes it's just a higher up in Roman society. Says, God, if your God is supposed to be perfect, God creates this body, and the body is supposed to be perfect. Like, why do you Jews go around and you mutilate the body? Like, if God's so perfect and if creation is so wonderful, why are you mutilating yourselves? Rabbi's response is, do you prefer the wheat berry or do you prefer a loaf of bread? Like God gives like that. There's the wheat. The stalk of wheat is fine, but but its more perfect form is this. And similarly, like God has given some raw material, and we finish it. We don't just take it as its raw material. So,
Strong argument.
Pardon me?
That's a Schwach argument.
Schwach argument,
I'm not impressed with that either.
which is
So why are you admonishing him?
no. He's not much me. There's this right. So chronically, so what's so in the rabbi's telling the story. That argument wins the day. But you would say
Healthier?
it's healthier, right? So the medicine of the day didn't allow for healthy or not healthy on issues of Brit Milah. But yeah, so that right. So the core thing, right? So, but notice, by the way, internally, that's actually the right answer, which is to say, we don't do it for health reasons. We don't do it for perfection of the body reasons. We do Brit Milah. There's a mitzvah. There's a covenant. This is a sign of our enduring covenant with God that we that this is a this is the eternal sign. This is sort of the sine qua non of the Latin phrase. It's the of Jewish life, right? This is what keeps us in. It's part of the language of the covenant. But to a Roman, what would they care about the covenant?
Right. That
Like-
argument isn't compelling to a non-Jew.
It's not a compelling argument to the non-Jew, right? So the rabbis will always give, the proper answer is, God commands Abraham, circumcise your son on the 8th day, and throughout your generations, this will be the sign of the covenant. The answer internally is, there's a pasuk in the Torah. We're commanded to do this. But to give, this is like the street corner preacher who tries to prove the truth of Jesus to you by citing the Gospels. This means nothing. It's great for you. Baruch Hashem. I'm happy for it, but it doesn't mean anything. But it's not. It's not something that I hold by. And the same thing. Yeah, they don't say it right. No, but notice what makes the argument good is the instructive thing is always make an argument on the grounds of the person who you're arguing with. Don't cite. It makes no sense for him to cite the Torah to the Roman, just like it makes no sense for anyone to cite their holy book to you when the whole point is that you don't believe in their holy book. So notice how the rabbis know that, and that's part of one of the things I like about that story is that he goes to something that they'll be able to understand. Oh, I get it. The natural world isn't ipso facto better than the human intervention in the world. Right? So that's an actual thing, and that's something that everyone can get. Oh, right. Bread is better than wheat. And there's no gluten-free issues, to my knowledge. Or if there were, just right. There were worse things. There might be worse things now. Anyway, so that's that argument. They were, but yeah, as a form of mutilation, outlawed, and then wanting to build a pagan temple. This isn't that hard to understand, right? Any time there's any change to the status quo in the same space, right, on the Temple Mount to this day, there's action, right? And whenever there's any change in the status quo between Israel and Palestinians, there's action. So that shouldn't be hard for even if you're a hardcore Zionist or a right-wing Zionist, whatever it might be. This should be easy to understand. Oh, right. And when there's friction in and around Jerusalem, it should be easy to understand because part of Jewish history. So this.
They mentioned, Rabbi, that there's why the lack of other Josephus? Where are the historians here?
It's just, who knows if there were other people writing? So the question is, where's the historians repeating this? Maybe there were, and they just didn't make it down to us, right? Not everything gets preserved. So one, maybe there were, and they're not writing it down. Two, Josephus was sort of a unique character, right? He's a Jewish general who realizes the gig is up and turns to the Roman side, and then begins writing history for Rome. But some of it, he's straddling two worlds. He's fully Roman at a certain point, but he really is apologetic to the Jews and wants to portray to help the Romans understand the Jews on the Jews' own terms as best as possible. So that's sort of a rare character, right? So there's nobody like that working. But yeah, so that's just the way that's just the historical situation. The Jews aren't going to write history because that wasn't part of Jewish culture. What Jews are going to produce is something that is not history, not history the way we think of it. They're going to produce the Mishnah and the Talmud, but and Midrash, but they're not going to produce something like history. It wasn't the value. So 128. So the key character in this, or the key figure in this era, Shimon Bar Kokhba, or Koz Bar Koziba. Bar Kokhba means son of the star, which is it's sort of like pulling from a biblical reference. His real name probably wasn't that, right? This is like changing your name when you get to Hollywood. His real name wasn't, Simon the Star. His real name, that was what people called him, or what he called himself. The rabbis who like him will call him Bar Kokhba, son of the star. The rabbis who don't like him will call him Bar Koziba, which sort of means like son of the fraud. Which is not uncommon, that they'll give an insulting name to somebody who's on the outs. So Bar Kokhba leads the revolt. One of the great things about Bar Kokhba, we asked at different points over the course of this class, what does history say about? For this, we have lots of history, because in Israel they keep finding coins minted by Bar Kokhba and his followers, right? So go to the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, which you can't right now, but God willing, there will be times will change. They have tons of coins that they find around Israel of year 1 of the Bar Kokhba and year 2 of the Bar Kokhba rebellion, things like that. We have it's very much part of the historical record that still pops up. So he leads an organized campaign, something of a guerrilla war against Rome. An early success in pushing back Roman troops. However, the Romans sent in reinforcements. The rebel army was overwhelmed, and Bar Kokhba and his forces were cornered in the fortress of Beitar near Jerusalem, which is where the bad stuff is really going to go down. Ultimately, the 3.5-year rebellion resulted in massive deaths among the fighters and the civilian population, and the destruction of infrastructure. Moreover, during the years after the defeat, Hadrian's regime continued to enforce harsh anti-Jewish policies, such as prohibiting Shabbos observance, Torah study, and Brit Milah, circumcision. So it got even worse, right? If they thought it was bad before, after the Bar Kokhba rebellion, the Romans came down yet harder. And on top of it, they were the way to hear the rabbis describe it after the fact. They said that the streets ran knee deep with blood in Jerusalem. So and all the way down, and that the rivers of blood went all the way down from the hills, from the Judean hills, all the way down to the Mediterranean. So, which is their way of saying it's a lot of blood. There were a lot of deaths, and there was a full scale. Worse than the Great Revolt in 70. It seems that the greater number of casualties was in Bar Kokhba in 135, and not in the Great Revolt in 70. So worse. So that's the key thing. So as it goes through this, nevertheless, Jewish life slowly recovered and continued. The focus of Jewish life moved away from the center of the country to the Galilee and the Golan in the north, where Jews remained. So the southern part of the country becomes less populated by Jews. Jerusalem will become a Roman city, and the Jewish folks in the north. So when you read the Mishnah and the Talmud, they're almost always in the northern part of the country, as long as they're living in Israel, which will fade out after 100 years or so. 100, 200 years, but where they live is always in the northern part of the country. So why does all this happen? Is the next thing, right? You'd think that they would learn their lesson from 70. Note to self: don't rebel against Rome, because last time we rebelled against Rome, we got crushed. And the whole idea that God's going to come and save us didn't work. So why do they do it again? Right. So there's a so one, you notice that he sort of talks about the changes in theology over time. Classical biblical theology is everything happens for a reason. God, if the temple's destroyed, God's punishing us. We have to get back on the path, and God will rebuild us. In the Second Temple period, more and more messianic thinking came to the fore, and apocalyptic thinking came to the fore. Which is to say that a sense of that there will be a significant change in history, and that those days are coming. So that aspect of a new chapter coming, as he calls it in the divine human drama, is more common.
One of those groups, the Pharisees, Sadducees, is that coming out of one of those political groups?
It seems to be coming from possibly all of them, or possibly not the Sadducees, because if from what we know of them, Stoking, they stuck close to the text of the Torah, where there's no hint of Messiah.
Or did that group come because that thought was already there?
So it's hard to say. Like the chicken and egg thing would be hard to crack. But it may even be pre those groups existing. I mean, ultimately, the book of Daniel has this, like, he quotes from the book of Daniel here, right? The book of Daniel, which is often assumed to be like the last piece of the Tanakh put together, or near the end of it, right? I feel like we've set a record. So we quote it: "Go, Daniel, for these words are secret and sealed to the time of the end. Many will be purified and purged and refined. The wicked will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand, but knowledge will understand. When the time of the regular offering is abolished, an appalling abomination is set up. It will be 1,290 days. Happy is the one who waits and reaches 1,335 days." There's a sense of there's some time coming, and there's a way of predicting that there's cryptic language of a change that is a divine change that's coming, and Daniel has that stuff in there. And Daniel has this sort of odd language of riddles and of different and kingdoms and giants. It's odd and unlike anything else in the Tanakh. Yeah.
And this emergence or popularity of the idea of the messianic idea come into play with the presence of Jesus on the scene.
Well, I mean, it's present before him, meaning that Jesus is like part of. The question is, how does that play into the Jesus movement? Like the messianic idea precedes that, right? Like they have an idea that because, as he says, like the Second Temple is built, but like the redemption never comes, right? The Second Temple isn't the first, so it's not as nice, it's not as fancy for most of its existence. The Arona Kodesh, the Ark isn't there. Whether or not that was a concern or not, I don't know, but like wasn't present. And the Israelites are always subject to some foreign power, so they're not really independent. The Scion of David isn't sitting on the throne of an independent Judea. So that seems to have fed the idea that a redeemer will come, an anointed of God to sit on the throne, and into that context steps the Jesus movement. But though it seems that he wasn't the only one who would have been thought a Messiah, but obviously he's the one who took. Bar Kokhba also, it seems, thought of as the Messiah. And certainly the way the Talmud tells it, certainly at least by Rabbi Akiva, who was the great of the generation, said he was the Messiah. And that's what, and those are the, if we'll go do one idea then the next, like so the sense of the Messiah is coming, which is, again, before Christianity, there's not a divine aspect to it. Like the Christian idea of the Trinity wouldn't have been part of a pre-Christian messianic thought, but the idea that there's somebody who's going to come and lead us to independence and a rebuilt temple in our homeland, that seems to be what the idea is. Again, Messiah meaning anointed in the sense of king. And there's a sense that you could predict that, and mysticism allowed a sense that you could predict it. You could figure out when these changes were going to happen, right? So that's at the bottom of 129. It says, for those who believed it was possible to read the map of history, it could be tempting to step on the accelerator in order to get the ultimate destination sooner, right? To try and force the redemption. And when things got really bad, the assumption is the reason they're really bad is because the redemption is getting closer and closer. As things grow worse and worse and worse, God's certainly going to come and bail us out. Pause the markets, as you suggested earlier, maybe. Right? God's going to bail us out of the situation. So that there will be somebody who's going to come and bail us out and defeat the great evil empire, i.e. Rome. And that was thought to be Bar Kokhba. He got a movement behind him, a significant movement, and got crushed. So that's 130, 135. That's the turning point that we're talking about. By the way, if you look at in the timeline on 131, the things for 135, like notice what happens afterwards. Bar Kokhba's last stronghold, Beitar, falls. Bar Kokhba is killed. The rebellion ends. Jerusalem is indeed rebuilt as Aelia Capitolina, and Jews are, i.e. a Roman city, not renamed from Jerusalem, and Jews are forbidden to enter the city. Judea is renamed Syria, Palestina. Many Jews abandon their identity. So this is when these pesky Jews that keep rebelling, and it's an expensive thing to keep, and a bloody thing to keep putting down these revolts. The Romans finally have enough. They renamed Jerusalem. They want to build a temple to Jupiter on the Temple Mount to show that your thing isn't being built again, but we're building on it. And they renamed the land from Judea to Palestine after the Philistines, who had been gone for a few centuries, but that's why they renamed it. So every so often, people can debate, I don't know how significant the debate it is, but they'll debate what to call the land. It's not Palestine before this point, right? So that. Not to our knowledge. But if there were an archaeological dig there, it would cause issues, of which we have sufficient right now. So yes, so all around, yeah. So probably not by now, but yeah, but there was but that we know that they at least laid foundation stones for it. So he gives two texts, both of which are sort of key texts in how the rabbis think of this period. So one from the first one he brings is from Eicha Rabbah, a midrashic collection. Begins by quoting the book of Lamentations, the book of Eicha. So the Lord has destroyed without mercy all the habitations of Jacob. So such as Rabbi Ishmael, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Shav, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, Rabbi Chutzpit the translator, Rabbi Yehuda the baker, Rabbi Hanina ben Tadrion, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon ben Azai, Rabbi Tarfon, and some leave out Rabbi Tarfon, including Rabbi Elazar ben Harson, meaning that is reading. This is a typical rabbinic way of reading a biblical text. When you have a line in the Tanakh, it says something, and it may mean what it obviously means, but it also might have a cryptic meaning. That the text of the Hebrew Bible is eternally meaningful, perfect, and cryptic, meaning it may mean something that isn't obvious to the initial reader. So when when the Book of Lamentations, presumably Jeremiah, says that God has destroyed without mercy all the habitations of Jacob, you'd think that just means he destroyed Jerusalem, that God destroyed Jerusalem in the temple in 586 BCE. What it really means, or what it also means, that he's foretelling that the habitations of Jacob, meaning where Israel dwells, will refer to the martyrdom of these famous rabbis who are killed in the 2nd century CE. 500-600 years after the time of Jeremiah, it's really referring to that, and that where God dwells in this world isn't just in the temple, but where God dwells after the destruction of the temple is in teaching Torah. So when it says that he destroyed, that's how they're reading it. Rabbi Yochanan said, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi used to teach, with respect to the passage, a star will come forth out of Jacob, which is in the book of Numbers. Read it not as a star, but as a deceiver. The star will come forth out of Jacob is what Rabbi Akiva used to justify Bar Kokhba being the Messiah. It says a star will, Jacob being a synonym for Israel, right? The other name for Israel, right? A star will come forth out of Jacob, that's Bar Kokhba, son of the star. He's the star that will come forth out of Jacob, and he's the one that will bring redemption, right? So he says, so the rabbis will always change around because there's no vowels in the Torah, right? So you can change the part of the midrashic trick is to change the vowels in the word to make it mean something else. So it says kochba, don't say kochba, but say koziba. It doesn't mean a star, it means a deceiver. A deceiver will come forth out of Jacob. That's why some people call him Bar Kochba, his supporters. Some people call him Bar Koziba, the deceiver. When Rabbi Akiva saw Bar Koziba, he said, behold, Melech Mashiach, the King Messiah, right? Akiva sees Bar Kokhba and says the Messiah has arrived. Let's follow him. Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta said to him, Akiva, grass will grow out of your cheekbones before the Messiah comes. Which is a sharp line, which means
Be dead.
you'll be dead. Like, don't. This is the key exchange, right? The Messiah has come. And if you're a believer, come and join. And then I even like the way he says, he doesn't even use the honorific, doesn't even say Rabbi Akiva. It's like, Akiva, grass will grow out of your cheekbones, which is to say, like, you can't live that way. You can't live that way because, by the way, if you think the Messiah is going to come, what's prone to happening?
Bad stuff.
Bad stuff. All of this. You believe in the Messiah. You're going to do stuff that's irrational, and you're going to follow somebody that's going to lead you to rivers of blood running through the streets. That's what's going to happen. Better just sit back and wait. When the Messiah comes, sit back. The Messiah will be able to take care of it. Not going to need your help. Not going to need your help. So that line just like sort of like, you're like, it's okay if it's after your lifetime. Your job is to do as good as you can. Don't bother trying to identify messiahs. Not healthy. Right? So great line. That's the key line. So that you see the debate among the rabbis, and you see by the way, the great rabbi who we remember, Rabbi Akiva, is wrong. And the guy that no one's ever heard of, and I think this is one of two references to him, if I'm not mistaken, in like the entire massive Talmud, Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta, a nobody. He's the rabbi of Yechupitzville. He's not a fancy guy compared to Akiva, especially. And he's the one who was right. Hadrian besieged Beitar for 3.5 years. He killed so many that a horse was up to its nostrils in blood, and the current of blood was strong enough to carry a stone weighing 50 selas and flow 4 miles out into the sea. Again, Beitar is in the Judean hills, far from the sea. So again, what did the rabbis think of recognizing messiahs? Dangerous, dangerous, dangerous business. Why are they skeptical from this point forward? It's not the last messianic moment in Judaism, but like, why is there such a skepticism? Partly because of this. why are Jews sort of why has Jewish history become what Jewish history becomes, which is to say like that. This image of not rising up for the next 1800 years, partly because of the degree of how terrible this experience was. Like they're clearly scarred, like the blood, a horse was up to his nostrils and blood, like left its mark. So that, by the way, what did the Romans do to those who supported Bar Kokhba? They don't crucify them. They slaughter them. They execute them pretty harshly. And if you hang out on Yom Kippur, yeah, among other things, if you hang out on Yom Kippur into the afternoon, which you should do in part because there's nothing better to do, because it's Yom Kippur. They in the Elas Kara, they traditionally they tell this. You tell the story of the martyrs who died during the Hadrianic persecutions. So the Lev Shalom has a number of them. Some sidurs have yet more. This is how it begins, right? In the time of the Roman Empire, God suffered 10 rabbis to be martyred. 2 of the most distinguished were taken out first, Rabbi Yishmael, the high priest, and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, head of the Sanhedrin. Rabbi Shimon pleaded to be executed first in order not to gaze upon the death of the one who had served God in the temple. The tyrant commanded that lots be cast, and it fell to Rabbi Shimon to be martyred first and have his blood flow like a slaughtered bull. Rabbi Yishmael picked up his severed head and cried bitterly, like the shofar, how the tongue that rushed to teach such beautiful words now licks the earth because of our sins, right? So the beheadings and things like this, that's part of it, right? Romans decreed that the people of Israel no longer be allowed to study Torah. Rabbi Akiva publicly convened assemblies and continued to teach Torah. He was captured and imprisoned. The hour of execution for the time of the recitation of the morning Shema. So as they scraped his skin with iron combs, Akiva recited the Shema. Right? So crucifixion, horrible. We're not getting into a contest here. Dying by having your skin scraped with iron combs, also horrible.
Don't they burn someone with the Torah?
Yep. And the Rabbi Hanini ben Tadriel, pardon me?
Isn't that the way you come here?
No. This is tearing off flesh with hot iron. They burn them, etc., etc., etc. It gets pretty graphic. The Talmud gets pretty graphic. But that's the scene, right? Like those executions are recalling this moment.
Why do we say that every year? Why is it so important to say every year?
On some level, I think it's the martyrdom tends to play prominently in most people, meaning like most nations or most national groups or ethnic groups in their self-conception. The degree to which people suffered for the cause is something that that tends to help inform people's identity, right? That's so. I think that why in Yom Kippur, it seems that might be an outgrowth of. I can't remember off the top of my head. When I'm closer to Yom Kippur, I tend to remember it better. An outgrowth of remembering the Crusades on Yom Kippur, and it grew backwards to include the martyrs of the Bar Kokhba rebellion.
I agree with you as far as the your martyrdom being a national identity issue. It's so important to say it every Shabbat.
Well, every Shabbat too much, right? So why not say it every Shabbat? Like too much. There is an Avarachmim that's in the Siddur for like most Shabbatot, but like every Shabbat too much. There are and Shabbat's supposed to be happy. So yeah, like not that frequently, but like frequently enough that it doesn't get forgotten, as it were. The full context, which I think is worth understanding, is that it was a misguided martyrdom in a sense. Not that they were wrong for being loyal to Torah; they should be loyal to Torah, but that was an ill-advised revolt. Really, they should and it speaks to the dangers of messianic style thinking, and God will save us. And so the next little piece, also from the Talmud from Sanhedrin, is also sort of like informing on rabbinic views of messianism and where it leads. Rabbi Zer, whenever he chanced upon scholars calculating the time of the Messiah's coming, people who sit around trying to figure out end times, right, would say to them, "I beg of you, do not postpone it, for it has been taught 3 come unexpectedly. The Messiah, a found object, and a scorpion," meaning that when you find something, by definition, you don't know you're going to find it. You don't know if you're going to walk out and find $5 in the parking lot, or if you should touch it if you do. Right? Found objects are surprises. A scorpion, always a surprise. And the Messiah, you don't know when it's coming. Don't try and calculate. Don't say this is in modern times too. There have been people who have like tried to calculate like when the Messiah is going to come. It's like, don't do it. You're wasting your time. Shmuel ben Nachmani said in the name of Rabbi Yonatan, "Blessed be the bones of those who could calculate the end, for they would say, since the predetermined time has arrived, has not come, he will never come."
Danger of getting it wrong.
Right.
What's the argument about Rabbi Schneerson?
Schneerson as Messiah, that's why a lot of Jews are uncomfortable with Chabad messianism. Schneerson, in his lifetime, truly brought a significant focus onto Mashiach, and a lot of people are uncomfortable with it because it's thought of as dangerous. I'd like the Bar. I mean, we're many years distant, but like believing that the Messiah is coming, as the author notes here, might be what actually kept us together. The hope that there will be a better world, and that we're not forever fated to be in the sad state we're in, but that tomorrow can be better, and all this could happen. That's helpful, but that actually thinking that the Messiah is here, that's dangerous. Schneerson believed that the Messiah was coming. May have believed he was. I don't know. Obviously, a significant number of his followers believed he was/is. When we go to Israel, there's still tons of signs around that say Melech HaMashiach with a picture of Schneerson. Many posters on the walls. So there's still a movement.
What's the theological position, let's say, of JTS about that?
Of JTS, Menachem Mendel Schneerson isn't the Messiah.
Right.
Right. We can say with some confidence, grass will grow out of your cheeks, right? A charismatic teacher and one of this pivotal Jewish figures, certainly of the last half of the 20th century, and not the Messiah. Yes. So, yeah. That's not terribly controversial outside of Chabad circles. In Chabad circles, there allegedly is controversy. Outside of Chabad circles, none. So definitely messianism is thought of as a dangerous thing, and especially identifying somebody as, right? We're not going to be, when the Messiah comes, we're not going to have to argue about it because It'll be obvious enough. I wouldn't worry about it so much. This is the great story. This one I truly love. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi met Eliyahu Hanavi, right? Eliyahu Hanavi lives and pops up in different places. He's the only person, or maybe one of two people that's not, who doesn't die, right? Eliyahu is brought up to heaven in a fire chariot pulled by fire horses. So he drops in every so often at a bris. Back to our earlier topic. Passover Seders, if they're not canceled due to fear of virus this year, and the like, right? So Rabbi Yeshua once emerged, I think he's walking past a cave, meets Eliyahu Hanavi and says, "When will the Messiah come?" Which is a good thing, right? If you have Elijah there, you got time for one question.
It's a good one.
Make it a good one, right? So good presence of mind. Good presence of mind. I would have been like stammering, asking for an autograph. When will the Messiah come? Go and ask him. Eliyahu tells him. He says, "Well, where is he?" He says, "At the gate of the city." When you say the city, it means Rome, right? Here, if you say this, if you're in Bridgewater, you say the city, you mean New York. If you're in Cherry Hill and you say the city, you mean Philadelphia. If you're in the Roman Empire and you say the city, you mean Rome. How will I recognize him? Eliyahu says, he sits at the gate with the poor lepers. They all unbind and rebandage all of their wounds at once. He unties and rebandages his one by one, so he won't be delayed when he is called. You got that? It's a fantastic, fantastic image. The Messiah is around, waiting for the call, and is always around, waiting for the call. So where do you find him? He is with the lowest of the low. Like the full Hebrew here is that he's at the gate of the city. The gate of the city. Why is he at the gate of the city? Because that's where the lepers are. You can't get in. Right. This is like in the story of the Snap, right? They're in quarantine, right? So he's with the lepers outside the city, with the people who nobody wants anything to do with. That's where the Messiah hangs out. So that's thing one. Thing two is they all have to change their bandages, and they do it sort of like all at once. Get rid of the old ones, put on the new ones. He changes his one at a time. So if the call comes, he can just finish wrapping the bandage and go and not be delayed even for a moment. To me, this is incredibly, incredibly beautiful on multiple levels. Both from where Mashiach is, from the idea that Mashiach is here, waiting for the moment to be right, and where Mashiach is, and how Mashiach carries himself, as it were. So Rabbi Yeshua goes to Rome and he found him. And he greeted him. And he said, "When will you come?" And he says, "Today." So Rabbi Yeshua goes home. Got his answer, right? Goes home, returned to Elijah, and he said, "He spoke falsely to me, saying that he would come today, but he has not." Elijah answered him, "This is what he said to you. Today, if you hear his voice," his God's, right? Like, if you deserve it, today. And if you don't, not. So who's the burden on? Us. You can't, right? So like you have to, like there's this impression that you have to earn it. And then you'll be good.
And we keep screwing up.
And he's still at the gates of Rome with the lepers, changing his bandages one by one.
Yeah, but isn't it almost by definition, if you say the Messiah, it's proof you're not.
Right. Well, correct. I would, if there are any number of things that if you claim you're it, you might not be. No.
I don't tell my wife, so
Yeah, nothing. We won't make any references, but yes, if you say the Messiah, that's a good indication you might not be it, right? This is so that the so by the way, notice how that story sort of cools off the embers of messianism, right? Like this isn't something you have to force. It doesn't happen through a war. It happens.
At a specific
It
time.
doesn't happen at a specific time. This happens through your individual behavior, all of our collective individual behavior, sort of moving in a certain direction. This will help define Judaism then for like the next significant amount of time, right? Like don't force it, right? Now it's sort of easier to understand like the part of the traditional opposition to Zionism was this, right? Don't force the end. Forcing the end leads to bad things. Don't force the end. Wait for God. Right?
Is it tough to assume that there would ever be a time when the people would act in concert in a positive way that would get the Messiah going? They don't have a good track record here.
We don't have a good track record, and this is like that's sort of the point, is that we individually and like that I individually have to care about me, and I as a member of the community have to care about you in order to make it happen. Like that's sort of so is a track record great? Well, the Messiah hasn't shown up, right? But like the idea is that there's sort of like this connection, it leads you to if we're acting in such a way where we actually deserve the Messiah, then we won't need it because we'll be acting in such a way as to merit it, right? Then you don't need the next step. So that, right. So this is his point. This is where he like sort of ends up the idea, right? 135, right? Legacy. Bar Kokhba revolt created new equilibrium regarding the place of messianism in the mainstream tradition. From this point on, messianism was for the most part controlled. Not always. We'll get to others later. But it's two things. Messianism remains a sense of that I believe in Messiah. If you look at the Siddur, right? At the end of Friday night services, traditionally, we sing what? When the wheel lands on it. Ein Kel has that's in the morning. Friday night, Yigdal, right? And in Yigdal, which is a sort of a poetic restatement of Maimonides' 13 Principles of Faith, ends with Yishlach Yiketz Yamin Mishicho Liftot Mechake Ketz Yeshuato. Right? Messiah, God will send at the end of days God's Messiah to redeem all who are waiting for salvation. Right? So like every Friday night that reference is in there. In addition, I mean it's also in the Amidah, right? There's waiting for the Messiah. So the Messianic belief remains, but it sort of doesn't boil over. It doesn't get too hot. Occasionally get too hot, but not frequently not, right? So it remains there, that hope that days will get better, maintains through the long exile, but it doesn't boil over into a disaster again.
Is that concept the same as the Christian concept of the second coming? Or is it different? Like the first coming was individual.
Different. I mean, classical Christianity has a trinity, right? Where there's sort of like a 3-in-1 of that God exists, like that Jesus and God are somehow both separate and synonymous. I can't all that intelligently on this, but my understanding is that. And Jewishly, certainly there's no sense of divinity in the Messiah, right? Like that's a Christian concept that's foreign Jewishly. So that sort of way that, if Jewish prayers, the formula that ends Jewish prayers, Baruch Atah, et cetera, like my experience, which is limited, Christian prayers often will say, like in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, which is like that. So that sense of God in human form isn't part of it.
But isn't there going to be another coming, another,
Yeah.
the second, in the Christian
Yeah.
faith, the second coming, is that analogous to what the Jewish?
Is his second coming parallel to this? Not necessarily. Actually, you touched on it before that there's a footnote you're fascinated with about the difference between a personal and a personal salvation and a national salvation. The Jewish concepts of the Messiah traditionally are linked to a sense of national salvation. What's for Maimonides certainly like, how do we know the Messiah has come? Because it's a king, right? By definition, it's a king who rules over Jews being independent in their homeland, right? Sort of a peaceful independence in their homeland. So that, like, certainly Jews being peacefully independent in their homeland, like, isn't essential to like most popular conceptions of Jesus coming back. Like, it's more of a personalized thing. Please.
In the sense that there's a Trinity that's all one,
Right.
that a creed that says that God, Trinity, will come again to judge the quick and the dead. That's a phrase in the Trinity. That means on Judgment Day, the Trinity is at the end, the final judgment at the end. The second coming is there to judge the quick and the dead. So you have the concept of an end time when you have the Judgment Day. So that's the end time is the second coming.
Okay, Timmy. So the end time is linked. Notice
It's not specifically a Messiah. It's Jesus in the sense that he is God. He is the Holy Spirit. He is the Trinity. He's all in one.
He's going to come back.
It's the end time. They believe that
history ends.
you've seen the Messiah as this flesh, if you believe that. And then the whole kit and caboodle is coming back as whatever it is when it comes back in the end. There will be an end time. The Christian picks up that you have an end of days.
So that sense of the end time is present in some corners of Jewish thought, right? That's the Ket Yamim, that's the end of times, and that's a phrase sort of picked up from Daniel. So that's present. So there are similarities and differences along the way. I'm in the camp of that it's that we do well to wait, like not to spend too much time like thinking about what that looks like, and more time thinking about how are we supposed to carry ourselves until that time comes. So thank you.
Things get awful before it gets over.
Right.
Doesn't Kabbalah have sort of an ending?
Yes, absolutely. So they're definitely it's not uncommon in traditional Jewish writings to find a sense of end times and a judgment and all these other sorts of things. Like that's, as I said, like that's in Yigdal. Like we actually say it frequently on Friday nights. It's just that nobody knows what we're saying. Right? Ket Yamim, that's the end of days, and the sense of judgment. And then the next line is about Metim Yechayael, that the dead will come back to life. So like that's there. It's just that it's got a catchy tune. All right, Adkan, back to our normal concerns. The homework assignment, your homework assignment is to identify the Messiah.
Check the bandages.
Check the bandages. Yeah, you are not allowed to travel to Rome. But Bar Kokhba, again, like that's like in some sense, like this is it is these turning points. It's a significant thing. So next time, chapter 12, we'll see what happens. Whether we're here, whether we're just doing it via internet, we'll figure it out. But I'll do it either way next week. We'll have class next week until we're told not to. I will follow all guidelines of our authorities. I think was canceled.